Welcome back to the Ecuador Insider Podcast. Jesse, Carl, thanks for tuning in. Good to be with you. If you enjoy this comment, please, right now, put a like on the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell. I think about 75, 80, 85% of our viewers are not subscribed.
Wow.
So we'd love to see you subscribe to the channel. Thanks for tuning in. We try to bring you a lot of content to give you the real deal, the inside scoop on what life is like here in the southern Andes of Ecuador, in the Vilcabamba, Loja region of Ecuador. We had a comment the other day asking if we've had a lot of these comments over the years, are we using a green screen? Is this CGI behind us? Is it the real weather? I guess somebody watching over time. No CGI, no green screen. You can hear the wind, you can see the trees blowing, you can see the clouds moving, you'll see birds fly by. We record here in Vilcabamba every Thursday morning, rain or shine, and there are some times of year where we'll get a stretch of cloudy weather or some rain here and there, but it's been beautiful now for some months, and we enjoy the weather here thoroughly in Vilcabamba. October 13th is our next Vilcabamba lifestyle retreat. We'd love to see you down here. Link in the description below to both the sign up as well as a promo video. So please check that out. If you're thinking about Ecuador, thinking about Vilcabamba, this is a perfect way to get all of the information that you could possibly want to have to see if this place is right for you. It's a great time. We'd love to see you here. So, jumping right in, today's episode, we're going to chat a little bit about what's going on in the world, what people are concerned about, and put that into context, for Ecuador and for life in the region of Ecuador that we live in. I think probably not 100%, but I would guess that probably 80+% of the people who are seriously considering a move like from US, Canada, Europe, Asia, other places to Ecuador are doing so in part because they're not happy with their current situation or the current situation, or concerned or have concerns about events in the world and what's taking place, and they're trying to figure out where's the best place in the world for me to live, with myself, with my family. For people who have kids, where's the best place to raise children? And it's kind of wild times right now, right? I mean, we have forest fires or fires of one sort or another going on, practically all over the globe right now. There's lots of social unrest, all over the world. People have grave concerns over the monetary system, the financial system. People are concerned about sort of government overreach and lack of freedom, really, in many ways. And the list goes on, right, in terms of people's concerns. So, I want to take kind of perhaps some of those things today and put them into context. And it's just our opinion, of course, but of what Ecuador and Southern Ecuador and the Vilcabamba Loja region and the Amazonian region, which is very close to here, which we cover as well. What solutions does that or does that not present? So yeah, I think for me, I would start that conversation in a couple of places. Number one, there is no perfect solution to any of these things on Earth at the current time, to my knowledge. I'll give you just a quick example of that, right? When COVID started and governments were going into lockdowns of one form or another in 2020, in 2020. I have friends that live all over the world. We have a network of people through our business as well that we're in contact with from different countries. People were in difficult situations everywhere on Earth during that period of time. There was countries that had more restrictions, less restrictions, of course. There was places where, life was a little better, a little worse, but everybody was dealing with it. Yeah. If we have major events, whether those are, wars or those are financial events, there's not going to be anywhere that's untouched right. By those kinds of things. If there's a global, anything I say that's enacted sort of globally is going to touch every country on earth to some degree.
Yeah.
Now, different places, of course, will react differently. And so I just want to start there. We obviously believe, and we'll talk about this further in this episode, that Ecuador presents a lot of solutions for things that we care about.
Mm-hmm.
It's not perfect, right? It's a government with people and places, and it's a place to live, and it has all its good and bad. So, okay, starting there. Secondly, I just want to mention also that I think one of the factors that I didn't know at the time when I lived in the States mattered, but matters to me now, to some degree, and this is going to sound funny. Like, if you're worried about sort of government overreach, right? If you're worried about tyranny of one kind or another, then you want to be in a place where governmental competence is less, right? Like, you want to be in a place where the level of organization, execution, compliance within the government structure is less, because in a place like the U.S., Canada, I would imagine Europe as well, people who work for the government, they do what they're told, period, right? And they're organized, and they're with it, and they know how to execute, and the governments there are very strong. This is a place where I would argue implementing anything at a high level isn't the strong suit of the government here, right? Not to say it's a clown show, like it really isn't, in my opinion. It just works differently. There's almost nothing here you can't get around one way or the other. People who work in the government are still very beholden to the communities they're from, to their families, to their parents, to their community. So there's not that same level at all of sort of distance between individual and person, like government agent or operative and person they're dealing with. It's a much sort of close. There's not so much a bridge there of, I'm just doing my job. You don't. That's not a thing you hear here.
Right.
People are people. Humans are humans, regardless of their job. Right. And also, you have. It's such a small society. It's such a close-knit society. You have friends in every level of government as well.
That's true.
So politicians, police officers, military people, people who work in different government agencies. That's kind of interesting to me. I'll pause there and kick it to you. Should I hit the next subject, or you got something you want to just jump in on?
Yeah, I just wanted to. You said something interesting that I think is worth mentioning. Just an anecdote. This morning I was having a juice at the juice factory and bumped into some clients that have bought a property a few years ago. And, we hadn't chatted for a while, and I know they've had some challenges with issues and, getting permits for stuff, or, some people they've hired that maybe didn't do the right job and they had to redo some things, and, shipping containers. They've had like a few issues that came up that they were very frustrated. I remember when they would share that kind of stuff with me. And the guy sat down and he's like, Carl, this place is really different. It's a different world than where I'm from. They're from Canada. And he's like, you really have to learn patience when you live here.
That's right.
You have to be very, 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 and 10 more very patient, more patient. You have to just be very, very patient to live here. That was kind of his point. But then he looked at me and he said, we've had a lot of challenges here, but I definitely wouldn't want to go back to Canada. And I don't understand why people are moving back to the U.S. because this place is amazing, And I just thought I'd point that out because you said, this place is not perfect, and clearly isn't. There's some crooks and some little things that happen that are a little different, right? You have to learn patience. You can't trust everybody, just like anywhere in the world. But at the end of the day, we found this place and we think it's wonderful, and many reasons to live here. And the pros outweighs the cons very, very significantly for me, anyways.
Yeah. Well, if we're telling anecdotes, I want to share what my day consisted of yesterday, right? So,
Nice.
on Mondays there's a group of us that play basketball 2 to 3 days a week in Vilcabamba, and there's actually good hoopers. Like it's the games are decent. It's super fun. Usually, generally speaking, half court. Pick up basketball 3-on-3, occasionally 4-on-4, occasionally we run 5-on-5, Monday and Wednesday mornings. So yesterday being Wednesday, played basketball in the morning. I take my children with me, my little children, my 2-year-old and 4-year-old. They play with other friends of mine's kids at the basketball area, which has grass and dirt piles and and a little playground. So they get to run around and do their thing. We finish that, hit the river, right? So we go. I take my kids, and we're all within 7-8 minutes driving. The court is far. The court's in the town next door. It's like 6-7 minutes away. Hit the river, swimming in the river. There's other friends of theirs that just happen to be there, so they're throwing water at each other and having a good time. Finish that, drop them at the park. My older one goes to play soccer, and then I spend the afternoon working. And this is like, these kinds of lifestyle perks are very achievable here.
For sure.
Which is something I appreciate about it. But so go ahead.
Yeah, I want to share my day today.
Please.
And it's only 12 o'clock, so just half the day. But yeah, woke up this morning, had breakfast with my family, then went to town. I had a business meeting, a real estate meeting. Had a quick meeting, half an hour. Then had half an hour until Fernando arrived. We were going to come and shoot the podcast. So went to get a workout at the gym, good workout, then flew through the juice factory, had a juice and a smoothie, drove to the river, got myself in. There were some guys making sugarcane juice next to the river, had a glass of sugarcane, and now we're here, midday, shooting a podcast.
Right. And the glass of sugarcane juice, which they're milling in front of you,
Yes.
would be 50 cents.
50 cents.
And the juice at the juice factory, which the juice factory for Vilcabamba is very expensive.
Yes.
The juice for the juice factory, if it's a smoothie, and I'm talking about a superfood packed, antioxidant packed, organic fruits of all kinds, exotic fruits you've never even heard of in the States, is going to be between like $3 and $4.
Sure.
For a smoothie like that, 100% organic. So, which is very expensive for here,
Right.
and back home that's probably like a $12 to $18
Right.
drink. Anyhow, so yeah, back to the subject a little bit. So that's one thing. Then, the other thing I want to touch on is that, if you're somebody who believes that there's something of a global agenda that's being played out, this is not a place in the world people care about, right?
Yeah.
Like if you believe that, those kinds of things are going on, Ecuador is not going to be the focal point of any of that sort of agenda. Again, if you believe that kind of agenda exists, which I think a lot of people do these days, you're not going to see. Ecuador does have a military. I would hate to see them have to fight anyone. It wouldn't be, there's no military really to speak of, and it's just it's a country with tranquil, relaxed people who work hard and are mostly involved in agriculture and some service industries. There's very little anything of importance here. It's got a tiny GDP. It's the size of Colorado landmass wise. Has a ton of natural resources, so you could say it's important for that reason, but only economically, in the sense of people would like to have access to those natural resources. So it's not a place that's really on the map in that kind of way.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think that's another factor. And then the other thing that I think makes sense to look at, right, is if things break down, right, if you have things happening that are ugly, whether it's war or whether it's financial calamity, or social societal problems, breakdown, the culture here, the community here, the society is the word I'm looking for, is so strong. It's so tight knit, right? It's so It's probably the way things were in Europe and in the States and Canada in the 1950s and earlier, you know, maybe something like that, where, you know, Ecuador is still a place where everybody knows each other, right? Where a 250,000, it's probably 300,000 person city now in Loja, everyone knows each other. It's wild, right? Where families know all the last names are kind of known, and people know, yeah, that's such and so's brother's sister's wife's uncle's cousin, and you know, and they went to school together, and this and that. It's a much less mobile society. Like physically, people don't move around as much, so the ties go back a very long way. If there's issues, right, who are you going to rely on, right? Your neighbors, your community, your friends, your family, the people around you. This is a place where everybody very naturally takes care of one another. Like this is not like back home. We almost have the mentality of, you know, what are you going to do for me?
Sure.
Right? We almost have the mentality of you know, what's in it for me, or what's my financial reward for anything I do, right? People here just don't live their lives that way. People here take care of one another. They care about each other. They care about their communities. They care about their culture, their family, the place they live in, and they live their lives that way. So I don't know. That's, for me, that's
Comforting.
Right?
For sure. Yeah. No, I agree. We've lived in many different places. We've moved around quite a bit, just in the Vilcabamba area. I think we probably rented at least 10 houses or more, and you know, we've had amazing experiences with neighbors, bringing us fruits, bringing us things that, you know, banana bread that they bake the morning before or whatever. People here just, it's the community mindset. Like, it's kind of probably how it used to be in the West, and we're in the countryside, so it's also, you know, kind of like you have to know your neighbor because you only have a handful of them. And yeah, where we live now, we have a really nice neighborhood WhatsApp group. Also, an anecdote: we decided to we had a gate on our street. It's like a private road, and it was always open. We never closed it. Someone suggested we put an electronic gate on it, and literally within a week, all the neighbors were in agreement. We all put in some money. Now we have an electronic gate that we all have a clicker to.
Nice.
And, you know, it's the kind of stuff that, I don't know, it seems like it'd be difficult to get, you know, 15 neighbors on the same page to be willing to pay, but it happened so quickly. Everyone was on board, and it happened extremely fast, and everyone's happy about it. It adds an extra layer of security to our street, our road. Another thing that kind of relates to, you know, community and is food security, right? Like, all of our neighbors, most people here in the countryside grow some food, even if it's just a small garden that they have in the backyard, or some fruit trees, or some chickens. Most people will eat somewhat from their own land. Some people eat most everything from their own land. Other ones, you know, just grow some vegetables and whatnot. But yeah, it's part of the culture here to grow your own food. So if there was some kind of food shortage of some kind, the strong community and the fact that everyone grows food would be a much more comfortable place to be, I believe.
Well, and let's jump into the food stuff then for a second, because not only do most people grow food in the country, but in the el campo, I want to say,
Countryside, yeah.
but Ecuador is a massive net exporter of food, right? So Ecuador does not import hardly anything, right? Grapes, grapes, apples, a few things that they import that it doesn't have a great climate for here. Although even grapes,
they do grow some, yeah. They grow
yeah.
apples as well.
They grow apples as well, yeah.
Not the same variety, so they do import some.
Yeah.
But Ecuador is pretty self-sustainable when it comes to the food production.
Yeah, and they export a massive amount.
Sure.
So this is a place where, yeah, I mean, and there's no winter, so
Right.
so you know, it's not a place where it's hard to imagine a food shortage scenario in a country that, you know, literally food is growing everywhere all
Sure.
the time.
It's true, and I think there's not as much monopoly when it comes to food production.
Right.
It's like a lot of small farmers, and they kind of, you know, they pool together. Like, there's maybe an industry where they'll buy all the small farmers' crops and then process them and package them and export them or whatever.
Yep.
But like the coffee industry, it's all small, tiny small coffee farms that bring
right.
in their coffee bean to the big Same thing with the milk. There's
Yep.
one buyer that goes and buys all the local people's milks, small amounts, and then they turn into, they pasteurize it or they turn it into cheese and whatnot. It's not like there's a massive milk industry that's owned by one company. It's usually a lot of small farmers. I think that the large plantations are mostly on the coast, like the big banana plantations and whatnot, banana, cacao, mangoes,
Shrimp, some certain things, yeah.
But overall, it's still a lot of small-scale agriculture.
Yeah, big time. So that's interesting. And then we talked about some of those other factors like weather, like food, and then I guess you could touch on some of the natural disaster stuff. And there can be earthquakes here. Certainly, on the coast is very prone to earthquakes. Up north as well is prone to earthquakes. This area much less so. We do have some volcanoes in the north of the country. There's no nuclear anything in this part of the world, so there's no nuclear power plants or any concerns like that. So yeah, I mean, I think on a lot of that stuff, letting the wind do its thing here. And somebody mentioned, yeah, right. Somebody mentioned, about the windscreen or the wind cover for the mic, which we do have, but it's just occasionally gets a little windy. We do like to record outside, let you guys enjoy the views while we enjoy the weather.
Yep.
But yeah, I think a lot of those things, we're in better shape here. The other question you get sometimes, which I think is an interesting question, is like, what happens if, and we'll get into some of the risks in a minute too, but what happens if there's an issue with the dollar? Because Ecuador is dollarized. Ecuador, the official currency is the U.S. dollar. Ecuador dollarized in 2000, or end of 99, early 2000. So, Ecuador's already talked about this multiple times, going all the way back to Correa, who's 2 presidents ago. And I've heard it talked about by presidents since then as well. So if there's an issue where the dollar becomes no longer attractive for Ecuador, they'll just switch currencies. And so they have their own potential backup currency, or they may go to a different currency. But, I think if the dollar were to have a major issue, there could be some short-term pain, certainly, in Ecuador. And then they'll switch over. But the reason I don't have a ton of concern for my investments, for example, here, is because the value of the underlying asset, like the underlying value, right? So if you own farmland, for example, or you own a piece of land that has amazing weather, fertile soil, water, all those kinds of things, regardless of what currency you're using to buy and sell that, the value's not going away, right? Sure. The value of that land is not going away, which is why I don't have concern, other than, sure, there may be a few weeks or a month or a few months where there's some weirdness going on if that were to happen, but I don't think it's going to have a long-term effect on asset prices or overall the country's well-being.
Sure.
Yep. Yeah. Good.
Well, I was going to say, it sounds like at least one of the theories out there is that there's a plan to create sort of a one world currency, digital currency, right? Central bank digital currency,
CBCD,
CBDC, right?
Central bank digital currency, CBDC, yep.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, I don't doubt that that's gonna happen one day. There's not much we can do about it to prevent it or anything like that. I think it just makes sense that this would eventually happen. But no matter where you are in the world, you'll be affected, and it will be a kind of a worldwide thing if it does happen. So nothing special about Ecuador, but nothing that would either be bad for Ecuador in any way. Yeah, they've talked about having their own currency here, or going back to Sucre. I don't know what that would look like. The Sucre collapsed, correct, in 2000 or something. So if they went back to that, would it be the same currency?
Well, no. I mean, they'd restart it. I mean, it'd be a new, a new issuance.
Right.
Which I hope they don't do that.
Yeah.
At least while the dollar's okay.
Right.
Because that allows. I mean, one of the advantages that Ecuador has is that it can't print, right? So
Sure.
Ecuador does not have. They have their own central bank, but they use the dollar.
Yep.
So, the Central Bank of Ecuador sets interest rates, but they don't produce money. They don't print money. They don't issue currency, and so Ecuador can't do what so many countries have done and just print itself into oblivion. It
Sure.
does not have that option, which is a huge advantage, in my opinion, over other countries in Latin America
Sure.
that have are in the process or have done that and have printed themselves into large amounts of inflation and currency issues. Ecuador has had practically zero inflation for the 10 years that I've been here.
Sure.
It's amazing how little
Yeah.
inflation there is in this country, and I think that's why.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah, and then when it comes to finances, I think it's always been a wise advice to diversify your investments. So, people talk about precious metals, cryptocurrencies, but land is an extremely valuable asset that, as you've mentioned, water, fertile land, good weather. If you can produce food, that's always going to keep its value, no matter what. So there's a lot of that available here for, pretty reasonable prices.
Yeah, and I think, talking about diversification, it's like the age-old axiom, not financial advice, by the way. People always say that. We're in Ecuador. We're allowed to say whatever we want. But not the age-old axiom, of diversification. And that traditionally has meant sort of like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, perhaps some real estate, perhaps some gold. But pretty much, other than the gold, pretty much all of that is within the same financial system that's all levered to the same currency, to the same monetary system, right? So, and all of those things, including real estate in the U.S., for example, are levered to the debt market. So if you have, you have stocks, bonds, mutual funds, you have U.S. real estate or European real estate. If you have an issue in the debt markets like we had in 2008, which got bailed out, so it was okay essentially. But if there's a sustained issue in the debt markets, all of those are losing a large chunk of their value. I mean, what would U.S. real estate be worth if people couldn't finance the purchasing of that real estate? Same in Canada. I was seeing a thing the other day. I was watching this few-minute thing on Canada. Carl's from Canada. I've only been there a couple of times, very briefly in my life. It's not a place I know a ton about, but I was watching this thing, and it was saying, I think I want to say it was Ottawa, but I'm not sure. Maybe it was, I don't know. Ottawa comes to mind, but apparently this is apparently real estate there is more valuable than like New York City, San Francisco, some of the most valuable real estate markets in the world. They were showing what $1 million house is. It's a piece of crap. Like it's a house I wouldn't want to live in.
Yeah.
Is $1 million house
Sure.
in this Canadian city.
It was not Vancouver.
I think it was Vancouver.
Yeah,
I think it was Vancouver.
It's the most expensive city.
I think it was Vancouver.
Sure. Real estate is ridiculously expensive there. Yeah.
And it was shocking to see, and why, right? Because of the debt markets. Like if the debt markets weren't functioning,
Sure.
that house is worth what, 100,000, 200,000, something like that,
Yeah.
that someone can actually pay for it.
Sure.
But since we have all the, anyway, so Ecuador doesn't present that issue. Still in Ecuador, I don't actually have statistics on it, so check, but many, if not most, of the transactions still in Ecuador are all cash. And the ones that are financing, like if you get financing from a bank here, you got to put a minimum of 30% down, and your interest rates are very, very high. So this is not a country where either consumer debt or debt related to real estate are high, or those debt levels here are very low, right? So people take little loans, right? They get
Sure.
$5,000, they get up to like 20 or 30. That's like practically a big loan for most people here. You can get some business. People have some business loans. There are mortgages. It's not that they don't exist, but the system is not built on credit in this country at all. And so it takes, not only does it create more security for the asset prices, but it also takes the pressure out of life.
Yeah.
People aren't on the hamster wheel in the same way just to pay back debt, right? I mean, in the U.S., like you've got your car note, you've got your house mortgage, you've got your whole life is financed. You've got your credit cards, you've got your student loans, you've got your whole life is financed, and so you're working your ass off, forever basically,
Yep.
just paying just in order to maintain the sort of status quo or whatever. That's essentially not the case here. Now, maybe a little bit in the cities, a little bit, in Guayaquil or in Quito, but that's it, right? And so it's a very different sort of formula, and I think part of that is reflects in the pace and how sort of relaxed everybody is and things are.
Sure.
People help each other out. If there's a family member who needs something, the family puts some money together, the community puts money together, helps out. It's different.
For sure. Yeah, I was gonna say the real estate prices. I thought we should jump on that a little bit because you're referring to Vancouver and other big cities, and what's the true price of real estate? Like, how do you assess that? I think, well, here, because labor is cheaper and building materials are at least comparable, maybe even cheaper here.
Much
some
cheaper
extent.
in most
cheaper.
cases.
Yeah.
There's a few things that why you said that there's a few things that are imported that are more expensive.
Sure.
But in general, if you're talking overall costs, they're cheaper. Yeah.
Is the steel actually made in Ecuador? Do you know about
I
that?
don't know.
Yeah, I mean, bricks are made here. Adobe,
Yeah.
the blocks, cement, concrete is made here. Stones, sand, rocks, all that comes from here. So that's relatively inexpensive. Steel, I believe, maybe some of it's imported, but still, because steel prices have gone up a bit. Maybe we have to look into that. So, but yeah, building costs are a fraction of what they are almost anywhere, at least anywhere in the Western world, because labor is cheap and materials are relatively cheap. Land prices are either comparable and in some instance maybe even higher. If you like in a rural area like Vilcabamba downtown, you're looking at $100 to $500 a square meter for like a urban property really well located in town. But as you've mentioned before in other episodes, there is a value. Land is very valuable to the Ecuadorian people because they don't always trust the banks, and they'd rather have their money invested in a piece of land that's going to at least keep its value or go up in value rather than having it sitting in the bank with some interest or something. So the land is very valuable here, especially for smaller, close to town lots. Now there's large rural properties that are a little further out that are extremely cheap per square meter or square foot or acre. But yeah, real estate prices are definitely much less than in the West here. But sometimes people are surprised, like a small lot, $40 a square meter for 1,000 square meters, 40 grand for a small lot like that. It sounds kind of expensive for Ecuador, but it's because it's a valuable, well-located, flat, usable with all the services hooked up. That's why that you have those prices.
Yeah.
Here.
In addition to what you pointed out, people kind of use them as bank accounts. But right, and that's the thing. I mean, this is true in any market in the world. But right, you could spend $40,000 for 1,000 square meters in a really sought-after space area, or you could go an hour away, or hour and a half, even less, 45 minutes away, and for 40 grand, you could get 10, 20 hectares of, like in the Amazonian region, for example. Like if you were here and you drove south an hour plus, or even 45 minutes plus. You're down to 1,000 to 5,000 a hectare basically for larger a little bit larger pieces. So yeah, but I agree, the value is in those larger rural properties that the market is soft on those. Like Ecuadorians don't value those the way they would have potentially in the past, but as people they're in the trends in the US that was in like the 50s and 60s. Of moving out of the country into more populated areas, and so those big rural beautiful properties, those markets are not super strong here, which is amazing if you're looking for that, because there is tremendous value there.
I was going to say the value is also in the construction. Like you can build a fantastic, really well built, really good home. For a fraction of what it would cost you to build the same thing almost anywhere in the Western world. I had a client who told me
60 grand you can build like a 3-bedroom beautiful house.
Sure. I was with a client, went to a build site. The house cost about $200,000 to build. He told me it would probably cost around $1 million to build the same house, like in New York or somewhere.
Sure.
In California or something. It's pretty much the same all over the U.S. Building prices are probably somewhat similar. So maybe land is slightly more expensive in a sought-after area, but it significantly, balance itself when you build.
Well, and even
home.
that, I mean, sought-after area here versus sought-after area in the States, it's way more expensive in the States. But yes, sought after area here versus not sought after area in the States, more expensive here.
Yes,
for
I
sure.
think that's what some people compare that. They're like, well, I could be in rural Arkansas and get like 10 acres for less than here or something like that, right?
Yeah, and in Vilcabamba, Malacatos, that's true, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Let's jump into the risks for a minute. So, from my perspective, from my perspective, the risks to Ecuador essentially are political. I don't personally have really any other concerns. I think those are the risks. Like if we get, if a government were to come into power that is of the ideology of a Hugo Chavez or a China, that kind of ideology, that's the risk, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the risk to. I'm talking to investment. We're talking sort of to asset prices and value. That's really the risk, and we've kind of seen that before, and so we've seen how that goes, which to me makes it a very, very minimal risk, right? So Rafael Correa, who was in power from 2006 to 2016, stabilized the country, did a lot of really phenomenal things, including bringing the country's infrastructure up to international standards. In the last 2 to 4 years of his presidency, became, or I'm sure he always was, but he started to introduce some policies and some proposed laws and so on and so forth that were of the ilk of a Hugo Chavez, of a Venezuela, of a extremely socialist philosophy. And the Ecuadorian people rose up and rejected it, right? They took to the streets, they shut down the roads, they threatened revolution. They literally, put the presidency on warning, hey, if you do these things, you're not going to be here for very long.
Sure.
And that's we've seen a number of those. We've talked about it many times. We've seen a number of events like that over the years, both during Correa's presidency, then Moreno's afterwards. I don't recall. Did we have one under Lasso? I don't remember. He was only in power for 2 years at this point, just over 2 years. But we've seen several of those types of events. But the biggest one by far was when Correa was announcing his craziest policies, and they bagged him, like they couldn't enact them. So I don't think the people here will actually accept a truly Venezuela style sort of dictator, right? I don't think they would accept that here. But that is the one risk, in my opinion, is if the country somehow were to slide into that kind of governance.
Yep. That is a risk.
So, all right, cool. Well, if you made it this long, thank you. I appreciate it. Please like the video. Again, we'd love to see you subscribe to the channel. Tune in. Reach out, info@abecuador.com with any questions. Come down for the retreat, October 13th. You're going to love this retreat. I absolutely promise you. I don't think we've had a single participant. This is going to be our 5th or 6th retreat. Who said anything other than this was incredible. Thank you guys so much. Lifelong friendships. It's been an awesome experience for us hosting them. Hosted at a beautiful hosteria here in town. It's just a great vacation on top of a absolutely value-packed 9-day experience. So come check that out. We'd love to see you here.
One day, and until then,
see you next time.
If you're interested in real estate properties, all of our property videos will now be uploaded on a different channel. Please click the link in the description down below.